Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is May 21st, 2024, and you are listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. And today we're here to talk about Tupac, but not really. We're here to talk about Tupac, who, believe it or not, has been dead almost 30 years, allegedly dead. I don't want any conspirators to come at me. Like, would you say yesterday, Beth, come at me? I don't want the Apple people to come at me. I thought about that later in the day yesterday. That made me crack up. Hey, what's going on? We actually have, let me say who's here because Robert just jumped in too. We have Beth, Jyunmi, Andy, Robert, and I'm Brian. And I was just saying, Robert, as you were popping in, that today is to talk about not really Tupac, but he's part of this story, this bigger story, and talking about some of this bipartisan legislation bill that's being proposed on the Senate side. It's a $32 billion proposal of emergency funding. And there's just a lot to unpack here. But I was just saying it to Beth right before we went live. It is, if you looked at the thumbnail, it has a picture of Tupac or a sort of picture of Tupac on it. And he is part of the story because of what happened recently in the music industry between Drake and Kendrick Lamar and diss tracks going back and forth and stuff and whatever. But it goes farther back than that, more recently into the Taylor Swift stuff. If we go way, way back, it's not AI, but there's stories that happened to Marilyn Monroe's estate that are interweaved in this. And it really all comes back around to the idea of where does federal government need to jump in and lay out some necessary guidelines or what they feel are necessary guidelines. Where do you leave it to the state? Let's talk about some of the places where the state has sort of tripped up some people where maybe a federal guideline would have helped with AI. By the way, I will say, at least me, I won't speak for anybody else on the show. I'm not an expert in this. I'm just going to talk about it because of what I've researched and stuff. So we're just having a conversation today. I'm not telling you what we think the law is. I'm certainly not picking any sides. But I think it's important to talk about this, especially the emergency funding. Now, I do want to say this because I didn't know the answer to this. And I thought I had it up on here, but I was curious about emergency funding because I didn't know exactly what that meant. So this is, by the way, from Google's AI overview. So it says in 2024, Congress is expected to spend $196 billion on emergency designations, which is an increase from 2023's 162. The funding is mainly allocated to disaster relief, Ukraine aid, and prior year legislation. In the last 30 years, Congress has designated 8% of the federal budget authority as emergency spending. And then it goes on to have a couple more things in there. But I thought that was relevant because this bill, this $32 billion for AI, was designated as emergency spending. And I think it's just interesting to kind of know, okay, hold on. How are they bringing this in? And it just essentially means, it was on my last screen, how they're able to push it through without some of the other steps that you would have to go through. I know it's really basic. Okay, let me stop talking here and let's see who wants to jump in. Robert, you're not always have the chance to be on the show, and you're a super busy guy, but I would love to get you. Maybe I always like to start with you when you are here. So
I don't think you want my opinion.
Of course I do. Because we want all opinions on this.
Well, I subscribe to the Robin Williams theory of politics, that politicians are like diapers. They need to be changed often and for the same reasons. And the reason why I just hate politics, I just hate it. I don't trust an ounce of them, even though I have to vote for one side or the other. I just cannot stand, because this bill right here, I guarantee it, there's money in there for some other thing that's nothing to do with AI. That's what they do. Yeah. That just aggravates me. So I don't think I have a strong opinion, but it's not opinion about the AI bill. I do think that's funny when it says emergency. Like what is like, oh my gosh, we got to do this, like, emergency. I'm curious what the thought process is behind it. Like, what do we need to do now to protect us? Is it inside the government, the uses of AI protecting the actual workers, or is it policies that they're trying to enact to protect the citizenry? So that's what I don't know.
I think I can answer that. This is an emergency because this 32 billion Senate plan is for R&D investment in AI. It's not for policy and governance of AI for the population. This is a reaction to the 50 billion estimated investment by the People's Republic of China in AI from the government's funding. right? So we have there's an AI race that's underway here.
Sure.
And a large portion of that 32 billion is going to be spent on defense-oriented AI, not, by stark contrast, the EU AI Act is actually about regulation for trustworthy development of AI. And I think that we're kind of combining those and talking about this 32 billion. The 32 billion is really focused on China and China's alleged misuse of artificial intelligence. So our bipartisan bill is saying, let's immediately invest 32 billion in R&D. Supporting.
Are you saying it's like defensive, like cybersecurity kind of defense, like in response to them potentially building AI tools that are going to, I hate to say attack, but attack the U.S.? Is that what they're saying?
Well, I mean, if you read what basically Washington fears Beijing could meddle in other countries' elections, for example. They could create bioweapons, and they could launch muscular cyber attacks. Okay, that's a quote from an article about what the senators said about this 32 billion thing. So the emergency nature of it is because there's fear and concern about a space race that's focused around AI, like the space race before. And it's really not at all about, regulating the use of AI by the U.S. population or companies or anything else like that. There has been an executive order from Biden,
right,
which was the executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. That came out in October of last year, but it doesn't have a lot of teeth in it. It's just focusing really on regulating AI use within the federal government,
right,
to use it in a trustworthy way. So I think that kind of frames what we're really talking about here with 32 billion. And I my apologies to Tupac if he's watching and he's disappointed that the 32 billion doesn't really relate to him.
Well,
go ahead.
Okay, so here's how this sort of comes together, and I agree, Andy. Like, did the $32 billion proposal or the 31-page PDF that I have up on my screen, does it name Tupac in it? No, but there's a trend line here of rapid bills being proposed. In this case, it was the No Fakes Act that was in April. By the way, it wasn't like it was 9 months ago. Is April. The 32 billion came after a 1-year review internally with over 150 AI experts. So, and then there's other bills that have been proposed on the way. The No Fakes Act came out. This was Senator Tillis, and he actually played the Drake song in Congress with the Tupac AI enhancement in it. And I think if we expand a little bit here, yes, I do want to talk about the $32 billion bill. I don't know why it's so hard for me to get all those B's out of there. But it's more like too about what I think this conversation could be today is about what you just said, Andy, about, this is why it's emergency. Where does this play into obviously what Robert, you're talking about politics? In other words, yes, this is bipartisan, by the way, but is it important for them to have this emergency, bill out there before the election for whatever those reasons might be? Not taking sides there. But then also what's going on with things like the No Fakes Act, which is about Tupac, which if you unravel backwards from there, and Jyunmi, I'd love to get your input on this, just looking at where this digital AI legacy part of all of this comes in, which is this going to be like some people suggested that after you pass away, that your state can control your AI, your digital twin, your AI legacy for 70 years, right? They're mimicking what's already out there when it comes to books and things like this.
Copyright,
until it's public domain. Or is that ridiculous? Should it be earlier? One expert suggested it to be somewhere in the middle, like 20 years, which was interesting because that would have made what Drake did, which, by the way, they didn't necessarily say was illegal when he used Tupac. It's his family, his estate asked him to pull the track, and he did. But it wasn't like anybody got sued or anybody won. Nobody's even quite sure whether it's illegal or not. And I think that's the bigger discussion here is, this goes all the way back. There's stories about Marilyn Monroe and her estate was in California, but she had a lot of ties to New York. And what happened in New York ultimately affected who and what was being able to use after her death, so on and so forth. So this isn't new, but AI certainly brings a whole new wrinkle into this. And now the idea of, after my passing, can my estate hold guard, or could they sell it off? If I was famous, right? If I was if I was Taylor Swift, or Taylor Swift after her passing, her estate could control, and maybe that's sold off to companies like it's often is, the rights to it. And then what can they do with that AI? What can they make digital future after death Taylor say and sell watches like they did with Tupac? And
Taylor is actually a really good example, because Taylor had a fairly famous relationship with her first record company.
Yeah, Scooter,
right? And she was not allowed to buy them back. So she's releasing Taylor versions, and it's a whole thing that I'm learning about. I'm not a Swiftie, but I am Swift adjacent, maybe.
I respect her as an artist and a professional. Yeah.
But that would had her launch happened with the current ability, or the ability in the next 3 years, likely the record company would also own those rights, right? No, nobody's done that, because that wasn't a thing. You're not allowed to make AIs do stuff that they can't do right now, right?
Let's not forget that the Copyright Office is pretty clear on what's copyrightable and not. So I think that at this point, whether a record company would quote unquote own it, they wouldn't if it was AI generated. That's number one. Number two, back to your point, Brian, copyright currently is death plus 70 years. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I kind of like the idea of giving the estate the ability to fall within that 70-year window, do what you want. I don't care. But the question really is, it's about the copyright. Like, what are we going to be allowed to do with artists? I know we're getting off topic with the bill, but I'm just curious.
Together,
I'm wondering, it's a slippery slope, but if you watch the video of Wyclef Jean, was it from Google's announcement, watching him in his studio and making music and showing how he can use, I just love that he embraced it like any other sampling technology. I was in a band back in the day, and we had a Kurzweil 2000, and we used to sample tracks, and we would put it into a techno song. It was all fun, right? Of course, it was illegal. You're not supposed to sample people back then, but I love the idea of using technology to make music. And he was like, we can jump ahead of this melody because we can use AI to help us make it faster. I love that. Like he made it obviously look good, and there's obviously some nefarious ways to do it, but I don't know. This is my rabbit trail.
No, listen, like I said, I think, I know that we're talking specifically about, in this particular case, music rights with AI, or maybe where the copyright is. But again, I think this goes back to the bigger topic, and it is about the $32 billion bill. Oh my God, I'm going to stop saying it. Because it's proposed, by the way, because it really does go back to, okay, where does government step in here? To your point, Robert, you hate that this is that you have to vote for somebody, and this has to be done, but you hate the process. You're with me. I think I'm like you a lot of the ways. Like I hate that this is the way we have to go through this, but we're watching what the EU did. They just passed, a very comprehensive AI. I don't know if you call them bill, but laws and things like that as part of the EU. And we can see what other countries are doing in their advancements of AI, be it China or other places, maybe some unknowns that aren't, as in the news, maybe as China might be. So where does the government step in? And does it in fact need $32 billion worth of emergency funding to get going so they can kick this off over the next 3 years, like you were saying, Andy?
Well, I'll tell you what. Well, if you take the politics aside, just talk about the tech and the genuine interest in getting ahead of it. I definitely agree with the initiative that let's use you and my taxpayer money to make sure we're not getting left behind by other countries like China who are government sponsoring these initiatives. So I definitely like that. What I don't want to start doing is putting shackles on this tech and making rules happen for private industry. Obviously, that's a big deal. But what's interesting, and again, going off on a soapbox again, I feel like, a lot of the private interests have a tendency to influence politics in a negative way. That's why they started putting limits on lobbyist efforts, right? Well, it's funny, just like a year ago, there's a lovely group of highly influential people in AI met with the government. And then, so they're the new version of the Pfizer's of the world or the big interest of the world. So they're the big AI interests influencing government decisions for good or bad. Typically doesn't work very well because there's money involved, and that's a shady part of the government piece. But that aside, that if you just take away the politics, I do want our government to do as much as we can to not get left behind, but also not to shackle our ability to stay competitive.
I wanted to go back a little bit to what Brian, you were saying, and followed up by Beth and Robert. And it really does come down to, or for this bill, or the root of this bill, like the No Fakes Act and things like that, it's part of a process for explicitly defining digital rights, or in this case, AI twins, cloning, those kinds of things, because it's not in the legal framework yet, right? Copyright has their framework, but they do not have, this new tech, this new emergence of this style of intellectual property right. And so a lot of this is, I'm not going to say the guise, but this is all in the framework of these protections. And so it's one of those major steps that we need to take to define and force that we have this inherent right, and that would follow under the larger copyright framework and things like that. And we've talked about data rights, and we've talked about digital rights and things like that. So that's what this larger move is for. Now, for this particular bill, this is tangentially connected. I think this particular bill, it is a larger or all-purpose attempt to, like Robert was saying, is to keep us at the forefront. It's to keep us in pace with what the rest of the world is doing, whether that be the EU or China or whoever. And a couple months ago, Saudi Arabia announced that they were putting in $40 billion, and at the time that was the largest single announced investment in AI. And what I found interesting about this bill is they said it was $32 billion a year. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, from 2026 or something like that. It's pretty recent, but it's going to be consistent spending so that it keeps us at the forefront of the R&D, like Andy was saying. But I wanted to take a look back at that rights. What I don't know about the specifics of this bill yet is where exactly
where's the money
planning to spend that money, and in what method. So it's I think there needs to be a little more clarity on that, because we, like you said, Robert, a lot of times things are just attached to a bill to push it through.
Well,
so Andy, what do you know anything about this bill, Andy, that specifically says what they're spending the money on?
Well, I can quote Senator Mike Rounds, who's one of the 4 people on it. It says a member of the group said the money will be well spent not only to compete with other countries who are racing into the AI space, but also to improve Americans' quality of life, supporting technology that could help cure some cancers or chronic illnesses, he said, or improvements in weapon systems could help the country avoid war. There's probably a lot in that. That's a little. There's a lot in this
military. That's not very specific either, right? That's like, we're just gonna throw the.
And it does go back to what Andy said. I mean, Andy, you're correct when you said it's R&D into technology, and that's exactly what I see as well. To understand the potential harms and development of new testing standards for technology. So that's this particular 32 billion. But look, the reason I always go back and bring in like whether it's the Tupac or the Taylor Swift or any of these large names. Well, that's because they're large names and they're easy. They're going to get into the news and there's going to be a news story around them. But Carl has brought this up. He's not on the show today, but Carl has brought this up either off show or on show, regardless. He's definitely said like, well, hold on a second. Well, what happens when you're some CXO or CEO and while you're the CEO or a manager and you authorize the use of your digital cloned voice or teaching or anything like that, and then you get ousted or you leave the company, and lo and behold, like 6 months later, the company puts out a new internal training, maybe it's external facing, maybe it's whatever, and it's got your voice and your face and it looks and sounds like you, and they're saying, hey, this is a digital version. But now you got this manager, whatever, going, whoa. I said that was okay for the project we were on while we were working on it. And the company says, well, no, we own the rights, don't we? I mean, we own the rights after we did it while we were here. And Carl's got a good point with that. That's not a Taylor Swift. That's going to happen. We're going to see these stories.
That's a good point.
Where does the research go when who's going to invest in this?
I do think that the people on this call right here, this podcast, I think the five of us could, given that we've been neck deep in AI for a while, we could probably surmise, we probably think about something for a second. Now, the bill and the generic stuff you just read out by that senator, that's for the masses that don't understand AI. And not that we're experts, but we know more than the general people. Each one of you, what do you think that means? Now, when I think of R&D, my first thought is they're going to build their own language model. I mean, what are they actually going to do? What is the literal thing that they're going to do in the sphere of AI? Knowing what we know about AI and R&D, what is they actually going to be doing? And I don't know what it could be.
Well, let's just be clear that this is a proposed bill that hasn't gone into committees where those congressional committees will decide what is actually in the legislation. And so it's very vague. It's paying lip service to a number of things beyond this bucket of money that I think is driven by the, as I said before, the national security interests largely, but also all the implications on national security and privacy and personal digital rights and so on. And they pay lip service to that in this bill, right? So they're talking about privacy and data protection in the bill. And they're basically saying this bill supports those things. And there are other bills in Congress that address things like deepfakes more directly. So it's still very vague. Yeah, no, I don't.
I'm just saying. Let's jump ahead.
$32 billion.
Let's assume that they that they move forward past the committees. What do you think that the committees are going to decide the money should be spent on? I can't quite understand how a government without getting involved in the tech themselves, I don't understand how they're actually going to do this. If you kind of take it the next step further, Andy.
Well, I don't have any insight into the actual congressional process of establishing committees to determine what the final draft of legislation will be here. So I really can't answer your question directly.
It's not about
my guess is I would say that the vast majority of that $32 billion will end up being allocated to pure basic research that is informing the intelligence community's applications of AI. Right.
Okay.
So there's going to be an alignment between what the problem set of the intelligence communities and the Defense Department are, and what pure research is going to be funded by this. So it'll be, that money will go to, a combination of academia and the Beltway bandits, and they'll be given money to advance the state of the art in technology, and that will hopefully advantage the United States in its sort of global position against other competing powers like China, Russia, and
now that's a good assumption. That's what I was looking for, Andy. Is what you just said. That's not a bad use of the money, and I think that's probably where they're going to say it's informing the intelligence community. It's money toward research. I definitely think that's good hypothesis.
I just wanted to bring this up I have it up on the screen, but I'll for anybody just listening, this also went out. This is from the same four bipartisan people that proposed the $32 billion. excuse me. And this is just from May of 2024. I found it online. It's just a PDF. You can get it at schumer.senate.gov. It's called Driving U.S. Innovation in Artificial Intelligence, a roadmap for artificial intelligence policy in the United States Senate. So I thought I wanted to bring it up, Robert, because I thought maybe these 9 sections, and I can write them off here really quick, might give a little bit more insight into where perhaps they feel like this money would be invested. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm kind of riffing off of what you and Andy were just saying. But it says the topics of the needs forum. So there was an inaugural forum, supporting U.S. innovation, AI in the workforce, high impact uses of AI, elections and democracy, privacy and liability, and then transparency, explainability, intellectual property and copyright, which we were sort of talking about, safeguarding aid against AI risks, and then finally national security. So I don't know that these are correlated per se, but if you were to go through and kind of go through this 31-page document, they have some, like sort of an abstract, like a road ahead, and what this committee is suggesting. And the committee, by the way, is called the AI Working Group. That's the committee that met with 150 experts over the last year. And these are the recommendations that they're putting forth. And I think the proposed bill, it accompanies this particular report, whatever they called it, right? What do they call it? A roadmap. It accompanies this roadmap for that. So I just want to bring this up. And again, if you want to find it or read the whole thing yourself, it's at Schumer, as in the senator, Schumer.senate.gov, and it's called Driving U.S. Innovation in Artificial Intelligence.
Yeah. So one critic said about this part of it that this is a flowery language about innovation, but lacking substantive issues around discrimination, civil rights, preventing AI exacerbated harms. So the critics are saying there's no substance here yet, but I think we have to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're basically laying out a roadmap, as you say, Brian, and these subjects will be addressed as part of the overall innovation plan. But I believe that most of the money is going to go much more immediately to pure research.
And so there are 2 things that we want to make sure that we include in this conversation. One is this is actually a very rapid response from the U.S. government, right? Like this is moving quickly. And it's not moving to the speed of AI development. So we're seeing it sort of like, yay, welcome to the party kind of thing. But also this is actually a very forward movement. And I believe from that defense and intelligence kind of standpoint, what has been experienced in previous elections in our country and other countries, the capability to subtly influence decisions that people make has expanded exponentially, and the price of it has come down, right? So that is also part of this, and in terms of timing. The other thing that I want to say is, if you're aware, and I've heard the story about Scarlett Johansson's voice and Sky being the voice of GPT-4 Omni, and that right now going on pause. They don't have permission to use Scarlett Johansson's voice, and they say they did not use Scarlett Johansson's voice.
It sounds close, but I don't think it sounds like her.
But I want to be clear, because we've talked about this in terms of copyright and 70 years after your death and Tupac's estate. It also confers your own digital rights to yourself with this bill. So,
and I want to bring one extra clarification to that, Beth, because I kind of feel like ChatGPT did this to themselves. The majority of their public-facing demos of 4 Omni or 4O were using the Sky voice. But if you just go to the blog and then watch some of the videos they put out of where they're just sort of sitting in a small room at a desk and the guy from Khan Academy is there, whatever. In some of those cases, they're using one of the guy voices, whatever it's called, Breeze or Air or whatever the rest of them are called. They're like, there's about 7 of them that you could literally go in your app right now and use. Sky or whatever was one of them. But it has nothing to do, like, it's a story, right? But it, like, the idea that this is the Siri voice is incorrect. And it's weird that it's been picked up that way, as if for Omni only had one voice. Well, no, ChatGPT has had several. This one has come up because of the as you were saying, Beth, the tweets by Sam Altman, which were apparently making it better. He tweeted her, I think you told me, and that's in reference to the old movie where Joaquin Phoenix, where she was the voice of the AI.
Plausible deniability walked out the room when he tweeted her.
So, I mean, they're not making it any better. I mean, God knows the CEO just didn't make it better for it. But I just did want to point out that for anybody that's confused on this, that is not the only voice that, like, they didn't ship with that voice. There's several of them.
Yeah, but if you put out a record album and every song is yours except for one song, you still violated copyright with that one song. So,
no, I mean, listen, I'm with you. I'm with you. I just wanted to make sure people knew that that was, like, this Scarlett Johansson sounding Sky voice was not the only voice that's in ChatGPT. You have several that you can pick. And so ChatGPT or OpenAI said they're going to remove that voice. And actually, I didn't look in my app to see if it's there or to look on ChatGPT, but perhaps it's gone for a little bit.
Right.
It's still there.
They've paused it.
Paused it.
I was able to use it.
But it has not paused in my app right now either. But
hey, one other thing I wanted to bring up on this topic, because, you know, as I was reading that back to Robert, is it still there, Robert? I can't see.
Sky. Yeah, she's on the bottom.
Sky is still there. Okay. That was on the app. Robert was holding up his phone. When we're talking about these bills or proposed bills and spending, obviously there was that line about, war. Okay, well, all right. Where how much of this is going to go towards war spending and stuff like that. But I did watch an interesting piece over the weekend. I don't remember who did the piece, but anyway, it was about Ukraine. And while I don't want to get into that, a whole other topic, open a can of worms, what I did find was interesting is that war, because Ukraine is willing to deploy some of these AI technologies immediately into the battlefield, is enabling the US to rapidly iterate and work through some of these AI technologies in real life, in real time, because it's not the same as where it would have to go through all the regulations and whatever it might be. So drone defense, anti-drone defense, and all these things that use AI as part of that. It was a really interesting piece, and it had to do with the company. It starts with an A. They're out of California. Arville.
Anduril.
What was it, Andy?
Anduril.
Anduril. That's what it was about. It was about Anduril. And anyway, this was part of it about how they make weapons for defense, and they have contracts with the government and so on and so forth. I just wanted to bring that up, though, because it's an interesting part about this. Like, okay, what part of that 32 billion would go to those efforts? And is there some push in there because they're thinking, okay, well, while this war is going on, we basically have a battlefield where we can test these technologies immediately and get immediate results back. And does that mean that there is an emergency fund there? Because basically the government's saying, hey, we have a free pass to get around all the regulations that we would have to do internally. And these companies like Anduril or whatever, like, we can basically create something for the government, deploy it, and get real-time data back on that, whereas that couldn't happen if there wasn't a war going on currently where the U.S. is supporting and so on and so forth. Just wanted to bring that up as part of the bigger, larger conversation here. It's certainly only one part of it, but worth bringing up nonetheless.
And also just want to say in that context, Ukraine is willing to do these things, and we have this ability to do some field testing, apparently, because Russia's been doing these things the whole time. Russia is not in this conversation because we're talking about our support of Ukraine in the war. It isn't that Ukraine is trying to do something that Russia hasn't been doing. Ukraine has been Russia's sandbox for psyops for decades.
Yeah. Yeah, worth pointing out for sure. And again, look, guys, anybody that's listened to the show, we're over 200 episodes now. But if you're listening to this show, you're listening to 5, 4, 7 people, depending on who we have on the show in a particular day, have an open and honest conversation about it. And just always remember that, at no point are we claiming to spout facts or the way it needs to be or anything like that. These are always opinions, and it's just an open conversation about people who are really interested in AI. So worth mentioning there as well. Hey, let me tell you what we have coming up the rest of the week. Tomorrow, we're talking about the news. There's been some big news from Microsoft. I thought it was going to be a little bit longer, but they dropped a little AI Well, I won't. I was going to use a word. They dropped some new news in AI yesterday, and so we're going to
Come back tomorrow.
What's that?
Are these cliffhangers? Are we doing teasers now?
Come back tomorrow, and we'll let you know what it was.
That's it. Come back tomorrow if you want to know what it is. Don't go use Google and go look for it. Just wait for us, and we'll tell you about it tomorrow on the show live. Thursday, we're going to talk about whether the AI bubble has in fact burst, or is it about to burst? Is this going to be like the .com era, and there's going to be a bubble burst? Have we plateaued with LLMs? Ethan Malik has talked about that, so that's going to be Thursday's show. Robert is shaking his head. So there you go. He's ready.
The scaling laws are proving true. They're going to be faster and faster deployments, not less. Anyway,
come back on Thursday.
That's right. And then Friday we have our bi-weekly recap show where we'll talk about all the stuff we've talked for the last 2 weeks. So any of the major news announcements that came out last week, we'll wrap in anything that comes out from Microsoft. If anything new on this topic comes out, we talk about all that. It's always a super fun show. I want to highly recommend you guys come and hang out on all the shows, but Friday, that bi-weekly recap is always a great show because we get to kind of untether a bit and talk about a bunch of different ideas and topics. And it always ends up being a great conversation along the way. So that's what we have coming up the rest of the week. I hope you guys come back and hang out with us. This one was an interesting one as always. Thanks everybody for showing up. Thanks for everybody in the comments. And we will see you guys again tomorrow. Until then, have a great day.
Aloha.